Hi parents, this is a follow-up to my video from a few weeks ago about reporting. I'd like to explain a couple of things to you so that you can read your children's reports easily and understand why things look a bit different to the last few years and what that means from this point onwards. But the first change to look out for is the language of the criteria. We've kept the same 5 descriptors and same 5 abbreviations. We've changed the language to make it clearer. So for achievement, as you can see, there is explicit reference to where the student is according to the expectations of the curriculum in that year level. As I mentioned in my previous video about reports, we're adding a grade for effort. And so here in the criteria, we're trying to describe the progression from beginning to put some effort into their learning all the way up to being really highly committed, demonstrating advanced levels of initiative and agency in their learning. So we'll be developing some objective assessment tools to measure this in the next year or so. But for the time being, the data about effort for the purposes of this report is really based on teacher observations and on anecdotal notes, and also to some extent the students' reflections. The subject sections of the report all look pretty much like this. The subject strands there are in bold, and then you have the grades next to them. And then the specific achievement standards for that year level are listed underneath. We're allocating the grade to the strand. So that means that the student may have done slightly better in this achievement standard than they did in this achievement standard, but the teachers are looking at their assessment data for those achievement standards and putting together a composite grade for that strand as a whole. And that's really just to prevent the reports from becoming far too unwieldy. If we were to report and provide a grade for each individual achievement standard, the report would become a bit of a beast. So we're using a 5-point scale, as I just referred to in the criteria, but it looks a bit different for achievement and for effort. So you can see that the sliding scale for achievement has steps between the grades, and effort does not. And so this is so that teachers are able to recognize and show growth in the learning, even if students have not yet been able to move from one grade to the next grade. So for example, if this student is on independent in semester 1, and then in semester 2 demonstrates growth, but not quite enough to take them to the next grade, to particular strength, then the teacher is able to show that growth on the report. And the same level of sophistication and nuance is really not required for effort. Now let's look at comparing this report with reports from previous years. And because we've changed the content that we're reporting on in order to align it directly to the curriculum, you're not necessarily going to be able to directly compare last year's reports with the reports from this year. So, for example, in English, we used to report against 4 strands: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And the bullet points underneath those strands were the same in every year level. This language did not come from the curriculum. However, we all know that the curriculum and the expectations become more and more sophisticated as your child moves up through the year levels. But what you saw on the report didn't necessarily show that. So you were likely to expect your child to just move along the sliding scale every year, right? I know that this is something that many of you found confusing, and it was certainly difficult for teachers to explain when students did not move further along from one year level to the next, because in reality, the expectations of that year level had become more complex and sophisticated than those of the previous year level. It was just that what was written in the report didn't make that clear. So from this year in English, we're reporting against 3 strands: speaking and listening, reading and viewing, and then writing and presenting. And as I said, the content for each of those changes every year and clearly becomes more complex and sophisticated from one year level to the next. So you'll definitely get a more accurate picture of where your children are according to the expectations and curriculum for that year level. But during this transition year, please don't expect them to be automatically getting higher grades than they did last year. A student like this one, for example, who was consolidating for both speaking and listening last year, may be developing this year, as the grade is now directly linked to the expectations of the curriculum for that year level. And it may be just that the student is coming to terms with those new, more difficult and high expectations. The curriculum's become harder. I hope that makes sense. It's the same for maths. For the last few years, we've been reporting against a set of mathematical proficiencies that are in the Australian curriculum. And while these proficiencies, so I'm referring to understanding, fluency, reasoning, and problem solving, while these proficiencies are actually incredibly powerful and highly important, it didn't reflect how the mathematics curriculum itself becomes increasingly sophisticated and complex from one year level to the next. And it didn't show how the student was doing according to the curriculum content for that year level. Again, I know this was something that confused and frustrated many of you, and the teachers felt the same, to be honest. So from now on, the report will contain the specific strands and achievement standards in the maths curriculum that have been taught that semester. So I think this is an example from year 4, and in year 4 they've done a lot of work on number, and so you'll see the specific achievement standards that they've worked on in that first semester. And then they've also done work on statistics in the first semester. So in that year level, you'll see number and you'll see statistics. The next semester, you may see more number and you may see measurement or shape or other strands of the Australian curriculum that have been worked on in that semester. So again, you may not necessarily be able to compare grades from last year with the new grades from this year, as our maths reports are now much more directly linked to the maths curriculum for that year level. Anyway, I reckon that's enough for today. I don't want to give you too much information and leave you more confused than you were before you watched the video. And so I hope that hasn't happened. I'll break down everything that I want to tell you about the reports into short chunks, and I'll be sharing a couple more of those this week so that you have them at your disposal when you get the reports on Friday. So there's my email address. As I hope you know, very approachable, always ready and happy to receive emails from you and to discuss how we do things with you. So if you've got something that's sprung to mind as you're watching that video, feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.